Generic AI autocomplete for message composition often fails to capture the nuance of personal identity, requiring users to edit suggestions so they better reflect how they actually speak. Intuitively, this need for editing should decrease if language models are personalized to a specific user's communication. But what happens when an AI system becomes so personalized that it begins to reshape not only how messages are generated, but also how a person expresses themselves? Let's see an example from Toby's life.
Hey, Toby. So what do you do for work?
We can see how the personalized LLM can speed up communication significantly, but it's crucial to understand how it shapes the user's sense of agency, identity, and privacy in daily life. People with speech impairments usually rely on augmentative and alternative communication for their daily interaction with society. For them, composing messages with just a few clicks is not a luxury but a necessity. While personalization using large language models has been shown to be technically feasible, it is essential to understand how such systems may reshape AAC users' everyday communication before deploying them in real-world settings. In this work, we empirically examine how an ultra-personalized AI-powered AAC system shapes everyday communication when trained on a single user's full AAC history and evaluated through an in-depth autoethnographic account. The project was broken up into 3 phases. First, we collected 7 months of all Toby's personal speech data. Second, we filtered the data, fine-tuned the language model, and built a simple AAC app implementing the fine-tuned model. And finally, Toby used the resulting app as his main AAC device for 3 months, collecting usage data, while reflecting on each phase through diary logs, providing a grounded perspective in the experience across the process. To learn more about it, I'll invite Toby to answer some questions about the project. So, Toby, before there was even a model, you had to collect the data. What did that phase teach you?
That's an excellent question. One of the strongest findings is that the system started changing me before the AI was even trained. In the first weeks of logging, I noticed myself becoming more self-conscious about how I phrased things. This then translated into self-censorship, avoiding things I would normally say, like swearing, gossiping, or making dog jokes. I sometimes avoided certain words because I thought, I don't want the LLM to learn this from me. Very much like an adult avoids swearing in front of children. At one point, I switched back to my old iOS Notes app because I wanted to complain about a neighbor with a friend, and I was going to say not very nice things, and did not want any record of it. That moment really captures the finding. I was no longer just speaking in the moment. I was curating a future dataset, and that changed my sense of freedom in conversation.
That's fascinating. Because it means personalization begins shaping communication even before deployment. Which implications did this have in the next phase where you actually fine-tune the model?
In phase 2, we filtered using a toxicity filter, and that filtering reflected choices about what parts of myself I was willing to delegate to the model. This produced a socially well-behaved model that reflected only the good part of my identity. Practically, this meant that 269 out of nearly 20,000 messages collected in phase 1 were filtered out, including utterances with profanity. For example, it's not just bullshit I wrote. The point is not just that toxic content was removed. It is that the model became personalized to a curated self, not the full messiness of everyday communication. That is why in the paper, we argue that ultra-personalization can amplify some parts of identity while muting others.
That's very interesting. When you were choosing which model to fine-tune, what was the main metric you optimized for?
That is a really important point in the paper. Accuracy alone turned out to be the wrong metric. What mattered most was whether the output felt representative of my style, especially the bilingual English-Spanish way I actually communicate. That is why some smaller or otherwise reasonable models were rejected. They felt too generic, or they did not capture that bilingual identity. So already in model selection, the question became less which model scores best, and more which model actually sounds like me, where the winner was GPT 4.1 Mini.
Then comes the real test, actually living with the system. When did it best support your communication style?
It felt most powerful when it supported forms of identity that generic systems usually flatten out. One of the nicest examples is when I met 2 high school classmates I had not seen in more than 10 years, and the model generated Argentine slang like che boludo, and even no soy boludo. That mattered because this kind of code switching is natural for me, and the model picked up on that cultural texture. There was another moment with a Venezuelan person I had just met, where I was explaining my research in a mixed Spanish-English style. The model completed phrases like "mi research es" with "en human-computer interaction," and later helped complete "to ayudar a people with speech impairment." In that conversation, I accepted all of the suggestions for that message and only typed 8 of the 25 words myself. In the paper, I described that as feeling less like prediction and more like co-construction of a bilingual identity.
This sounds amazing. The model really captured your identity.
Yes, but these personalizations weren't always good. Contextual fit was a crucial breakpoint. The model could be great in structured academic situations, where elaboration helps. But in fast, messy, social conversations, the opposite happened. At bars, during quick topic shifts, or in mixed conversations jumping between work and personal life, the model often pushed toward familiar patterns, instead of what I actually wanted to say in that moment. Over time, I noticed the model was subtly steering dialogue, pulling toward familiar patterns or vocabulary, narrowing my expression rather than expanding it. That is one of the most important findings about agency. Personalization can support expression, but it can also quietly steer it.
So how did that personalization impact or enhance your sense of privacy?
Yes, privacy was a central topic in the paper. It appears in 2 different ways. First, there is privacy during data collection. Once conversations are aggregated, remarks lose their original context. For example, an inside joke like, "we basically get paid to fuck around," is appropriate with close friends or coworkers, but clearly inappropriate in a conversation with an advisor about funding. That illustrates the contextual integrity problem. Once a remark is decontextualized and stored, it can be reused in ways that no longer match the social setting that gave it meaning. Second, there is privacy during live use. I experienced moments where the model surfaced intimate details in professional contexts. For example, bringing suggestions related to my religious background in work meetings. It also points out a very specific design tension tied to my communication style. Because I often show the screen while typing, suggestions can become visible to the conversational partner before I have even accepted them. In literature, this is described as a risk of forced intimacy, and we argued that the system needs to know not only what to suggest, but also when and in front of whom to surface it.
That's a very interesting point. These systems should know when to step back. What other design considerations do you have to design future ultra-personalized AAC tools?
A well-designed, ultra-personalized AAC system is not just one that sounds like me, but one that knows when to help, what parts of me to bring forward, and how to keep me in control of the system itself. First, these systems need to determine when to surface suggestions. In my experience, even very accurate suggestions could feel disruptive or invasive if they appeared at the wrong moment, especially in rushed public situations or when other people could see my screen. That means future systems should be sensitive to timing, pace, visibility, and social setting, not just prediction quality. Second, the system needs to determine what to surface based on my multifaceted identity. One of the central findings of the paper is that personalization can both support and flatten identity. So a good system should not assume that all aspects of my identity are equally appropriate everywhere. It should understand that identity is contextual, relational, and dynamic. Third, I argue that users should have agency not only over what they say, but over the AAC system that mediates their speech. In my prototype, that meant design choices like inline ghost text, partial suggestion acceptance, and the ability to override suggestions immediately, all of which helped me preserve my agency. But the broader takeaway is that future systems should let users tune the model and interface in a no-code way as their needs evolve.
That sounds phenomenal. Looking at a broader picture, what does this imply for the future research in AAC technology?
My previous research looked at how agency preference shifts in time-pressured scenarios like making a humorous comment, how AAC users form their own microculture of communication with embodied cues that define their identity, and in this paper, how agency, identity, and privacy are constantly in tension and dynamically shaping communication. My work reframes AAC as a medium of expression instead of a workaround for missing speech. Designing AAC systems that are not fixed devices but living ecosystems shaped by and with their users, balancing agency, identity, and privacy to enhance expressivity, so that people can fully flourish in society.